Greetings, mortals, and welcome to this video about effective argument.
So, I think that many people do not have very effective argumentation skills. One of the reasons is that they have a very difficult time going into someone else's shoes. Very difficult time. I found that people who are not writers fundamentally lack the what if capacity. When I'm talking to people, I find it very strange how difficult a time they have to, sort of step into the other person's shoes and understand where they're coming from. Because they want to have empathy, but their idea of empathy is, if I'm this person, then what would I do? But it's not you, it's some other person with a completely different background and a completely different set of beliefs. So a good example of that is the abortion debate. The abortion debate is something that's going to be in debate and hotly contested forever. There's never going to be a time when people are not hotly contesting this, because it is a fundamental moral question. At what point do humans gain rights? At what point is it not about the woman and her body, and at what point is it about the fetus and its body? It's that simple. Where does that line get drawn? Right? That's an argument that people will be having from now until the end of time. And it's important to understand that the people who are for more sort of like generous rules when it comes to abortion are not murderers. They do not think of that fetus as being a human. They think of that fetus as being basically a part of that woman's body, right? That it's up to her whether she wants to remove it. And people who are, and this is a generalization, this is most people. There are probably some people who are really hardline and crazy, who are like, 11th month abortions are fine. Fuck babies, right? There are probably a tiny number of people who are really just crazy people like that. But that's not who they are. Generally, that's not who people who are, they say for the woman's right to choose or whatever, right? I'm just going to use each side's lingo, because I think that honestly it's more appropriate to their own beliefs. So the people who are for the woman's rights to choose believe that it's best for society, it's best for the woman, and that it's best for the child. On the other hand, you have people who believe that as soon as there's conception, that is a creature that has a soul. Now, it's more importantly, so that's an important distinction, is that the brain doesn't come into play. When you're looking at it from a religious perspective, brain activity is meaningless because it's not about the brain, it's about the soul. Now, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in souls. But if you believe in souls, then souls are the important thing, because they're immortal. So, coming from their perspective, what you're looking at is a situation where you have to figure out exactly when that becomes something with a soul that you have to worry about. Because if it dies without being, confirmed, or not confirmed, if it dies without being baptized, then guess what? It's going to limbo or it's going to hell, depending on your particular ideology. Because the whole concept of limbo was invented by the church to help grieving, mothers who are like, well, my kid didn't get a chance to get baptized. Are they going to hell? It's like, well, doctrinally, yes. Let's change the doctrine. And so they changed the doctrine to create limbo. But limbo isn't exactly the optimal state. So, at any rate, we've got. So you have to think about that from that perspective. You can't think about it from your perspective of, like, oh, well, I mean, it's clearly not morally relevant because it doesn't even have a brain. You have to think of it from the perspective of, does it have a soul? And if this person believes it has a soul, are they justified in thinking that you just murdered a child and sent them to hell? And the answer is yes. They are completely justified in believing that. That's a wholly justified belief. It doctrinally fits with the way that the things that the church believes. And that's super important. So limbo was created as a way of getting around that, but it's not enough. So, and because people are never going to buy into any sort of dogmatic change globally, this is an argument that people are going to have until religion stops being a thing. And after that, people are still going to keep having that argument because there's such a thing as an opportunity cost, right? You have created this thing which could become, the next. Shit, I keep thinking of horrible people. I need to think of a good person. It could be the next Einstein. It could be the next whoever, right? This could turn out to be a very, the next Martin Luther King Jr. Any of these people. And it could be this amazing person, and it was not given it the opportunity to be. And so reasonable people will disagree on this. And it will be a very heated debate the entire time. Okay? But so you have to think and have empathy for the other side, because they aren't monsters. They're just coming from a different point of view than you. And you might think that different point of view inherently makes them incapable of morality. But that different point of view makes them incapable of making the same moral decision that you're making on this particular issue. On most other issues, you'll agree. And it's okay to heatedly disagree and to be, it's okay to occasionally get angry. But you have to understand that both parties are coming from a good place. Okay? On a similar vein, let's talk global warming. Global warming is important. And it's a real thing. Okay? The amount of evidence that we have for global warming is significant. Okay? And a large number of the people who don't believe in global warming are people who don't believe in global warming because some authority figure that they trust has told them that it doesn't exist. And a decent portion of those people who don't believe in global warming are religious, because the particular group that has a vested interest in convincing their constituents that global warming is not a thing has constituents who are religious. So the issue there is that a lot of the attempts to convince people that global warming is a thing basically just fall upon deaf ears because they're not speaking the same language. Okay? When you give a graph showing global temperatures over the course of the last 4.5 billion years to someone who believes that the Earth is 6,000 years old, they are immediately going to tune out. And you might think people who think the Earth is 6,000 years old are few and far between. People who will admit to that are few and far between. People who 100% believe it in their hearts, probably few and far between. People who suspect that God likes to play tricks on us, common. People who suspect that a lot of the stuff that we find is stuff that, maybe it was a thing. Maybe it's just a nice story God's telling. Right? That's important to understand, is that a decent number of people don't buy into the idea of a $4.5 billion year old world. think it was 4.5, right? Anyway, some people don't buy into that. And even the people who do, a lot of them do not buy into the idea that we actually have the ability to look at temperatures from 4.5 billion years ago. Because that's, let's face it, you're stretching it, right? And if you actually understand all the science that goes into it, you understand the types of techniques that they're using and things like that. If you actually learn all of that, sure, you'll be able to figure out why it is that they're able to do that, right? But much like with physics, where most people's reaction to physics is to just go, like, modern physics is so bizarre that most people just say, fuck it. The scientists are basically just doing magic at this point, right? That's basically people's reaction to some fields of science. You have to understand that some people have that same basic reaction to most science because they don't buy it. Most people who believe that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old do not have any concept of how we know that. They don't have any understanding other than a scientist told me. Well, a priest told this person something else, okay? Fundamentally speaking, there's no difference there. There's no difference between those two things, okay? There is a difference in the sense that the scientific method actually, works. So there's rocket engines and things like that. So we have a degree of evidence that what the scientists are saying isn't coming out of complete thin air. But the scientists who are saying these things are not the scientists who invented rockets. So fundamentally speaking, it's a matter of who you trust. And it's entirely normal for people to trust the people that are close to them. So here is the purpose of this section. The reason that I mention global warming is that global warming is important, and it's a thing. And a lot of people who don't think it's a thing because they think that God wouldn't allow it. And I'm here to put a rain on your parade that God would 100% allow it. Okay? The Christian God is a God of tests, and the Christian God gave man free will, and that free will means you have consequences for your actions. You are able to do what you want, and those actions have consequences. They have both consequences in this world and in the next world. That's important to be understood, is that the whole purpose of this planet, if you believe in Christian ideology, is to test us. All of it is a test. So yes, this is a test. When you look at, if you're someone who comes from the rural areas, like rural, I'm not talking suburbs, I'm talking rural. Go visit a suburb. Well, first look around. Look at the edge of civilization. And then look at the little piece of civilization that your community has carved out for them. Okay? And then go look at the edges and what the actual wilderness looks like. And remember that that's not actual wilderness, because that wilderness has been tamed by you and your predecessors. Then go to the suburbs. Looks a bit different, doesn't it? Looks a bit more human. Little more controlled. Every plant, every tree, every grain of grass was put there by a person. And then you go to the cities. And then everything that's there was not just done by individual people. Everything that was there was done by a group of people. The roads, the trees are just sitting there in the middle of a sidewalk. It's insanity. There's little tiny patches of grass next to, like, in the middle of some walking area because somebody thought it would look nice. There's nothing natural about it. Everything about it was done by men. That's what free will is. That's what we have done with our free will. we terraformed this planet and have fundamentally altered this planet. And if you think, oh well, the sky is not within our dominion, okay? You say, okay, well, yeah, sure, the Earth, sure. The water, yeah, probably, because we fundamentally altered the oceans with our with the way that we fish, right? Certain types of fish just don't, they're gone, right? And this is a well-known phenomenon. And it you know, there's some stuff that has to do with global warming with regards to oceans, but most of it is just, you know, overfishing and things like that. Then you look at the sky. Look into the sky at night. And so when you're coming back, when you're going back to the rural area, or if you started in the city, do it in reverse. And if you started in the suburb, well, screw you. Pick a city or pick a suburb, a rural area to start from, and then start the journey. Sorry, you don't live in an extreme. But on your way back, do it at night and look at the sky. In the city, the sky will be filled with city things. There won't be any stars. None. You can't see the stars in the sky. If you think you're seeing a star, you're probably seeing a satellite. They're a lot closer and a lot brighter. You can still see the moon, but all those stars, those purviews of the heavens, they're gone. Go to the suburbs. Stars are back. Good. Everything's working fine. How many stars are there? Continue on. Go back home. Or the opposite of home. Look up in the sky. Stars galore. Now, you're in a rural area. Go out in the middle of the ocean. Sucks to be you. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. Try going out in the middle of the ocean. It's just about the only place that you can see the real sky. Just like the fact that the woods that surround you, even in your most rural of areas, have been tamed by humanity. So is the sky. There's too much light, even in the most rural areas, to see all the stars that you can see naturally from Earth. There's very few places on Earth that do not have enough light pollution to interfere with your ability to see the stars. And light pollution is a 100% man-made thing. Do that, and then tell me that humans don't have the capacity to fundamentally change the nature of the world. We do. And if you're a Christian, it's our God-given right. The question is what we do with it. And that defines who we are and what our inevitable fate is. So, this has been a video about thinking about things from other people's perspective and thinking about things when you're trying to convince someone of something. Don't use the things that seem the most obvious to you. You have to take your consciousness and think about it from their perspective. You have to think about it from a perspective of someone who is not like you. Okay, if you're a religious person and you're trying to convince someone who is secular about something, think of a secular argument. You have to think about it from their perspective. And the thing is that we mostly agree on things. We mostly agree on the big stuff. We mostly agree on it's important to protect people. It's important to, help each other. Whether we're religious or secular, it doesn't matter. We're all people. We all have the same morals. And whether you believe that we all have the same morals because God created us all the same, or whether you think we all have the same morals because we created gods that had our morals. Regardless of what you believe in that regard, we're all the same. We all think fundamentally the same thing. We have different types of reasonings behind our morality and where we think our morality comes from. But fundamentally speaking, we all are looking for the best for us and for those that will come after us. So anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope this has been a thought-provoking video, because I think that people don't think about people from the other side as being just them enough. They don't think quite the same way you do. Well, that's not true. They think the same way you do. They just don't have the same starting point. So you have to look at things from their starting point and say, what is it that will speak to them? And when you're talking to someone about global warming, for instance, if you're talking to someone who's secular, bring out the graphs. Bring out the graphs, bring out all the evidence, all that kind of stuff. If you're talking to someone who's religious, you first have to make it feasible. You have to make the idea that God would allow this feasible. And the obvious reason that it's feasible is that the whole thing is a test. And it's all temporary. God does not care about this world. This world is going away. This is a testing ground for humans, explicitly created for the purpose of deciding which ones get to go to heaven and which ones cease to exist eventually. Hell is not eternal. Fun fact. Anyway, the basic gist is the reason that hell isn't eternal is that I think after the second coming of Christ, all the souls that were not worthy basically disappear along with the world, along with hell, and Satan doesn't get immortality. Basically, Satan is not immortal. Well, I guess it probably depends on your particular sect of Christianity. There's probably some disagreement within the Christian community about that particular issue. But all Christians agree pretty much that this is a testing ground for us. So if that's how you have to portray things to them, is you have to say, does it seem reasonable to think that God is just going to fix it? Why would he? The whole point is that we have free will. So, when you're talking to people, if you want to convince someone of something, then think about it from their perspective, understand their perspective, and then make an argument that will make sense from their perspective. And if you can't make an argument that makes sense from their perspective, then recognize that you might not be able to agree on this. And that's something that's true for things like abortion. For things like abortion, reasonable people will always disagree. It's something that people will always be disagreeing on. But when it comes to other things, it's actually not particularly controversial. Global warming isn't really controversial from whether you're looking at it from a religious or a secular context. It actually fits perfectly with both narratives. It just does. So, humans are important, regardless of whether you're thinking from a secular or a religious standpoint. We are the dominant species on the planet. And whether that dominion was given by the fact that we're just really fucking good at dominating things, or whether it's because of some God-given gift, doesn't matter. They both align. That power that humans have aligns, and a lot of people feel helpless and feel powerless. And as an individual, sure, yeah, you're mostly powerless and you're mostly helpless. But that's not true of our species. Our species does a lot. So, be kind to each other, help each other, and try to think of things from the perspective of others. Because if you don't put yourself into their worldview and actually believe it for the purposes of your argument, you have to not be trying to undermine their belief, but trying to work within their belief to understand how you can make them understand the thing that you're trying to explain to them. Right? If you want to convince someone that it's our duty, our responsibility to do something about this, whatever that thing is, you have to understand where they're coming from. And you have to respect it. You have to respect the fact that it might be that there really isn't a way for you to convince them. And so you might just be SOL. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. And I hope to see you again next time.